Okay, so let's dive in. We got some interesting stuff sent our way about this company, New Capital Link, NCL for short.
NCL, right.
And, our thing here is to, really dig into a company's online presence, see what's what. So we want to pull out the key details and, more importantly, figure out if there's any real cause for concern.
Yeah, especially with financial companies.
Yeah. And we've been mostly looking at their digital stuff, right? Like their website, how they put themselves out there online. And right away we hit something kind of strange. Their TLS certificate, how long it lasts.
Yeah, that was an immediate red flag for me.
So for people who aren't super techie,
Yeah.
What is a TLS certificate anyway, and why should I care?
So a TLS certificate, it's like a digital badge of authenticity and security. It encrypts the data that goes between your computer and a website so that, hackers and snoopers can't see what you're doing.
Right. Makes sense.
And any website that handles sensitive information, like financial stuff, really needs to have a valid TLS certificate. It's like a basic requirement. And usually those certificates are good for at least a year, often longer. It just makes sense, to have that continuous security. But NCL, they're running on a certificate that's only good for 3 months.
Okay, so a 3-month certificate for a company that's handling people's investments. Yeah. That does seem, I don't know, a little sus.
Yeah, it raises some eyebrows for sure.
So why would a company like that opt for such a short-lived certificate? Doesn't that seem a bit, counterintuitive?
It definitely does. I mean, you want stability and trust in the financial world, really. And a long-term security certificate is a part of that. It shows you're in it for the long haul. But a short-term certificate, that's something you often see with companies that, well, they might be trying to fly under the radar a bit.
Under the radar.
Yeah, they don't want to be around long enough to attract too much attention. It makes it harder for regulators, security systems, all those guys to keep track of them if they're constantly switching things up.
Oh, I see. So it's like they're intentionally trying to be hard to follow.
It could be. I mean, why else would a company that's supposed to be handling people's money be so cagey about their security?
Right. Yeah. That's not exactly inspiring confidence. So instead of investing in, solid long-term security, they're choosing to just do the bare minimum.
Looks like it. And that definitely raises some concerns about their commitment to transparency.
Okay, so we've got the short-term TLS certificate.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird, but there's more, right? We also found something strange about the number of external connections from their website, like tons of them.
Oh yeah, that was something else.
But I mean, websites connect other things all the time, right? Like analytics, payment processors.
Totally. You need external connections for a website to function properly. But what we're seeing with NCL's site, it's way more than normal, significantly higher. And when you see that kind of volume, it's a huge red flag.
Okay, so explain that to me. What does all this outbound communication potentially mean? What are we worried about here?
Well, one possibility is they're harvesting data. The website could be designed to suck up user info and send it off to who knows where. That's always a concern.
Yeah. Nobody wants their data floating around out there.
Exactly. But then you also have to think about the potential for shadier stuff. Things like cross-border fraud, even money laundering.
Whoa, okay. Hold on. Money laundering. How does that tie in with all these connections?
Well, think about it. If you're trying to hide where money is coming from or where it's going, the more complex you make the trail, the harder it is to follow.
Right, yeah. More layers, harder to see through.
Exactly. And all those external connections. It could be a way to obfuscate the flow of funds, make it really difficult to trace where the money's actually ending up.
Okay, so it's all about creating confusion, making it tough to track. And that definitely doesn't sound like something a legitimate company would be doing.
Not at all.
Is there anything specific about their website setup that kind of backs up this concern about them, trying to hide stuff?
Oh, yeah. A few things, actually. First, they're using shared hosting, which means their website is basically bunking with a bunch of other unrelated sites on the same server.
So, they're intentionally trying to blend in.
It could be a strategy, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes it harder to isolate their activity. And then there's the fact that they change their domain registration info pretty often.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that with the TLS certificate. So it's like another layer of instability, right?
Right. And then there's the whole issue of the servers their site interacts with. They're all over the place, geographically speaking.
All over the place.
Yeah, we're talking servers in multiple countries. Mm-hmm. And that just adds another layer of complexity to trying to trace anything, whether it's data or financial transactions. It's like trying to follow a single thread through a tangled mess.
Yeah, it's all starting to feel a bit like a deliberately tangled web, isn't it?
It really is, and none of it screams transparency or trustworthiness, which is, kind of important when you're dealing with people's finances.
Yeah, definitely not a good look.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about their online reputation, specifically on Trustpilot. We heard some rumblings about their reviews maybe not being totally legit.
Ah, yes, the Trustpilot situation. Look, online reviews can be helpful, getting a sense of what other customers think, but you always got to take them with a grain of salt, especially with financial companies.
Especially with financial companies, yeah. Why is that?
Because there's just so much incentive to, well, let's just say, massage the truth a little bit. And with NCL, there are definitely some red flags that suggest their reviews might not be entirely organic.
Not entirely organic, okay. So what are we seeing? What kind of patterns are making you think these reviews might be a little too good to be true?
Well, first, you've got a lot of these 5-star glowing reviews coming from accounts that have literally done nothing else on Trustpilot. Like they signed up just to praise NCL and that's it.
So like single-purpose accounts.
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
that always raises suspicion, Why would someone go to all that trouble just to leave one review? Unless, of course, they were incentivized to do so.
Right, yeah. Makes you wonder. And the language of the reviews themselves, is there anything fishy there?
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. A lot of the positive reviews are super generic, like they're all great company, amazing service, but there's no real specifics. It's almost like they're reading from a script or something.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's like they're trying to create this image of being universally loved, but it's all a bit too perfect, a bit too rehearsed.
Exactly. And then you have the whole timing thing. Sometimes you see a whole bunch of positive reviews all get posted in a really short time span, like bam, 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 all 5 stars.
And that's suspicious because...
Well, it could be legitimate, but it could also point to a coordinated effort to artificially boost their rating. Like they've got people out there specifically tasked with flooding the site with positive reviews.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's checking out online reviews for, any financial company, what's the key thing to remember?
Be skeptical. If everything is glowing and perfect and there's no sign of any real people behind the reviews, that's a huge red flag. Look for a mix of opinions, some good, some bad, and pay attention to the reviewer's history. Do they seem like real people with genuine experiences?
Makes sense. Okay, now let's talk about, I guess what we could call the elephant in the room, the issue of false regulatory claims.
Yes, that's a big one. And it really undermines everything else, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about trust and legitimacy here, which are kind of crucial in the financial world.
Yeah, this goes beyond just trying to manage your online image. This is straight up potential deception. And what we found is that emails that were supposedly from a James Harper, also goes by James Baird, claim that Alpha Trustee Services Limited was regulated by the FCA.
Okay. For those who aren't familiar, the FCA, that's the Financial Conduct Authority, the UK's financial watchdog. They're the ones who make sure companies are playing by the rules, protecting investors. So is this Alpha Trustee Services actually regulated by the FCA?
No. We double-checked, triple-checked with the FCA, Alpha Trustee Services Limited. Not authorized, not regulated.
So someone's lying.
Looks that way.
That is a big deal. So can you break down for us, for our listeners, why claiming to be FCA regulated when you're not is such a big deal? Why should people care about this?
Well, the FCA is there to protect investors. They set standards, they make sure companies are financially stable, they enforce ethical conduct. If a company is FCA regulated, it means they've jumped through all the hoops, they're being monitored, it gives investors a sense of security.
Right. So falsely claiming to have that regulation, it's like trying to trick people into thinking you're safer than you actually are.
Exactly. You're creating a false sense of security, implying a level of oversight that simply doesn't exist. And if a company is willing to lie about something as fundamental as their regulatory status, it makes you wonder what else they're willing to lie about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If they're willing to fabricate something that important, what else are they willing to fudge?
Yeah.
So bottom line, what should anyone do when they're dealing with an investment firm to make sure they're not being misled about their regulatory status?
Easy. Don't take their word for it. Verify it yourself. Go to the source.
Yeah.
The FCA has a public register on their website. It's easy to use. You can look up any company and see if they're actually authorized.
So just to recap, we've got the super short TLS certificate, the weird amount of external connections from their website,
Right.
the potentially fake reviews, and the really concerning false claims about being FCA regulated. Altogether, what does this tell us about NCL?
It paints a very concerning picture. When you consider all of this and then add in any pre-existing concerns about their leadership, it starts to feel like they've built this elaborate facade of legitimacy, but behind it, there's something else going on, and none of it's good.
No, not at all. So for the listener who brought this to our attention, and really for anyone out there who might be looking into NCL or even any other investment firm that seems a bit off, what are the key takeaways? What should people do?
First and foremost, verify everything. Don't just take a company's word for anything. Check their regulatory status with the FCA. Use online tools to look at their domain history, see if they've changed ownership a bunch of times. And don't just skim those online reviews. Really dig in. Look for those red flags we talked about.
So be a skeptical, digitally savvy investor.
Absolutely. Don't just be dazzled by a flashy website or a bunch of glowing reviews. Do your homework.
And if a company's pushing really hard, making promises that sound too good to be true, what should people do?
Run. Seriously, run. Legitimate companies don't need to use high-pressure tactics.
Okay, so based on everything we've seen, everything we've learned about New Capital Link, what's your overall assessment?
Steer clear. Avoid them. All the signs are pointing to something being very wrong with this company. It's just not worth the risk.
And you mentioned a resource for anyone who wants to do a bit more digging, who needs maybe a more in-depth investigation. Could you share that again?
Sure. If you have concerns about a company and you need a real deep dive, you can contact investigations at insolvencyandlaw.co.uk. They'll get you the information you need.
Great. And on that note, this has been a really, really interesting look at how we can all be more informed, more aware online.
It really has. It just shows that you can't judge a book by its cover or a company by its website.
Not at all. And sometimes the things that look the most legitimate are actually the ones hiding the most.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah, it is. So here's a final thought for everyone to ponder. Think about what it says about a company when they put more effort into appearing legitimate than they do into actually being legitimate. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.